All right.
Welcome, Timothy Frisch, to the Freeborn Podcast. It's great
Thank
to have
you.
you here with
Thank
us.
you for having me.
For those that are watching, we are here with Timothy Frisch. He is a YouTuber, podcaster. He has a very good podcast that I recommend highly called The Frisch Perspective. I love the name of that. That's what got me watching it to begin with. That's a cool name. You've made the most of your surname.
Yeah, I mean, my surname is Frisch, which in German means fresh.
Nice.
So a lot of people don't realize, but it's not just saying my perspective. It's actually talking about a fresh perspective.
Correct.
If you're thinking about it in German.
See, I didn't know that was German for fresh. I got the pun, but I didn't realize that it was that much. I mean,
it literally means a fresh perspective.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, you hit the jackpot on the name then. Everyone's like,
Yeah.
Darn it.
Yeah. I thought about different names, and when I came up with that one, I was like, maybe somebody else has thought of this because this is pretty cool. And I looked it up online, and I didn't see anything trademarked, so I'm able to use that name. Nobody else has it. Although I don't have it trademarked myself, so maybe I need to do that.
Yeah, we're gonna start calling this the Frisch the Frisch Podcast.
The Frisch.
Yeah, no, that's a really cool name. So Timothy, just so we know, here I'm gonna put this up. So can they see it?
Yes, they can.
All right, this is Timothy's book called God Matters: The Importance of Belief in a World of Doubt. I bought mine. Well, not this one. Timothy was nice enough to send me this one. I appreciate that. But I bought mine on the Kindle app. I read all my books on digital. I don't hardly ever read a paper book, even Bible anymore. I read everything digital. So I bought mine on the Kindle on Amazon, which is very affordable and easy to get. I love the book. I read the book, and so when I you know how it was. I was watching your podcast, and I would see your book in the bookshelf and behind you. And so I didn't realize you had written a book. So I saw that it had your name on the cover. So then I went and looked that up, and I thought, oh, wow. So I got the book, and then I wanted to talk to you about that and other things.
That's what they call product placement.
Correct.
And obviously it works.
Yeah.
I put that book up there, and
it does work.
It gets people curious, just like you've got that shirt on there. We were talking about
Yes.
that, and it made me curious.
Yes, exactly.
There
See,
you go.
I got this sailboat, but I don't sell it or make it. Someone just gave it to me.
That's product placement?
That's my product
Sponsored
placement.
by whoever makes that.
Yeah, but I don't know whose it is. I have no products to place.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I put that up there. No. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I don't know a lot about you. I mean, I've been watching your YouTube channel for a while now, but why don't you tell us about?
I live up in New England, in Claremont, New Hampshire. I have 6 kids. So we have 4 boys and 2 girls, and our 2 youngest girls, they're still pretty young, so they make me artwork. This is from my 2 youngest girls, and our youngest one is actually adopted. We adopted her. It's interesting because she was only 13 days old when she came to us, and the state brought her over. And what was really, really good about that is obviously only having her since she was 13 days old. She's always been a part of our family as long as she can remember. But from my wife's perspective, it was really nice because it was the easiest delivery she ever had.
She says, I should have been doing this all along.
Exactly.
I didn't know they had a store for them.
Delivered to our door.
Yes.
The store brought it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But,
wow.
Yeah, really cool. So we have a large family, but 2 of our children now are actually at college. My oldest child son is at UNH, and my daughter, my second oldest, is at Gordon College. And I've been doing ministry up in New Hampshire for close to 20 years. I was working full-time at a church for quite some time as a youth pastor and then associate pastor. And then God began to really lead me into more outreach, evangelistic ministry, helping with different churches, and starting this YouTube channel that I have now.
How did you get started with that?
Well, I watched a lot of YouTube channels, and it just got me really interested in the concept of starting my own channel. I always wanted to be an outreach to our culture, but I felt like, this was an untapped area for the church. I mean, there are YouTube channels, but there's not a lot necessarily out there that's really trying to engage the culture and trying to really bring Christianity into the culture. So, I mean, we have our YouTube channels that we do as Christians, but they a lot of times are just geared very much toward Christians. So I really felt led to do something that, of course, is going to edify Christians, but also I hope will draw in people that are just searching and want to understand Christianity and engage in dialogue.
Mm-hmm. And how long ago did you start the channel?
That was actually a little over 2 years ago. And probably from doing YouTube here that it is not easy to get noticed on YouTube.
No.
So it's funny going back to my numbers. Um, I didn't get to 1,000 subscribers till earlier this year, so it took like almost a year and a half to get to my first 1,000 subscribers. But now I'm actually over 11,000 subscribers.
Yeah, you took right
Once you
off.
get noticed, it does start to pick up.
Yeah. And so, what have you learned doing this? I mean, when you got started, and then I assume I don't know if you were anything like us when we started. We look back at it, and yeah, it was pretty lame. And we're trying to get better as we go. Did you have the same experience, or were you a YouTube phenom starting out the gate?
No, I mean everything in life is a learning experience, and just getting more comfortable doing it. Obviously, we're all different. Some people are more natural in front of the camera, but most of us struggle, doing something new and being in front of the camera. So just getting comfortable doing it and learning my own process, and then getting better equipment as time goes on. And you know how important that is.
Yeah.
You do need good equipment. And so I've improved my equipment. I think it was just, several months ago that I started using a better microphone and, improving the quality. Got a little better camera. So improving the quality definitely helps, and that and just working on your own personal skills.
Yeah. Now, are you a one-man show doing this, or do you have people that help you do this?
Yeah, I'm just a one-man show right now. Just me by myself recording
Wow.
these videos, editing and everything.
Yeah, because a lot of your videos you put in like clips of things you're talking about and things, and so all of that takes. I mean, that all is time consuming.
Yeah, it is. And again, that's where just learning the skills and getting better. It used to take a lot longer. So I am getting to the point where I have a better rhythm and I'm able to do things fairly quickly. Also, I just try to stick with what I'm good at. I obviously, I like to teach. I do like teaching. I'll put slides up at times. I'll show what's on my computer screen, but I'm not doing a lot of huge multimedia technical stuff.
Right, right, right. When I first started, I got mocked so bad, so made fun of so much in our church because I was so stilted. I was like, and so everyone was making fun of me. You need me to raise yours? Here, hold on a second.
Sure.
There we go. Yeah, it was real bad, and everyone would make fun of me because it was like, soon as the camera turned on, it just turned into a piece of wood. Like, hello.
Of course. I mean, that's natural, just to, and one of the nice things about doing YouTube all the time is you start to see yourself a lot. And they say practice in front of a mirror if you're going to do speaking. Well, it's like you're always in front of the mirror when you're doing videos. So yeah, at first you're kind of wooden and you feel awkward, but as you see yourself over and over, you start to say, okay, I could be more natural if I do this or that, and so you just kind of get into a groove.
Right, right. And then, so are you, other than YouTube doing right now, what other ministries do you have going on?
Well, I really just try to, be focused on evangelism. So I do go to churches and sometimes speak at churches, help them. I will sometimes lead music. I am a musician and have done a lot of music leading. But really, my heart is to go to places where I can speak, share the gospel. You know, like the book that I wrote. I just want to engage the culture and explain the gospel to the culture in a way that makes sense in this context.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a very important aspect that is missing in some churches. I think it's like there's a divide in Christianity. There's some churches that are really focused on that view, and then it seems like other churches seem to be, and I'm not trying to criticize anyone, but seem to be like in a bygone era that is quickly running out. The sand's running out of the bottom of it, and I think that there those a lot, and these are a lot of these small churches. They have aging congregations, and they don't seem to really understand that things have changed dramatically in the last, say, 10 years.
Such a good point. And I think part of that is that the culture does change, but it changes gradually. And so, a lot of people now I think I saw that today online. Someone posted, "I wish America was the way that it was when I was young."
Hmm.
And I can understand that sentiment, but, things change over time. The way that America was 20 years ago is not the way that it was 100 years ago. And so there's always change, but it's gradual. And you're right, the older generation can struggle with that. I did a lot of youth ministry, and people that are engaged in youth ministry ministered to millennials and Gen Z. And so I'm very aware of kind of the things that they're. Myself am pretty close to millennial, a little older than that.
You mentioned that in your book. You have a line in your book that made me think of this. I actually wanted to bring it up. Now's a good time. You were talking about how you and your wife, when you were dating, when you were courting, you were in New Jersey. She would go to New Hampshire in the summer, right? And that you would write letters to each other. And it made me remember, because that's how I grew up in Mexico, in old Mexico. My dad was a missionary down there, so I lived there for like over 30 years. And but my wife is from San Antonio. Well, when we were courting, it was all through letters. This was back in the early 90s. So there was no internet, there was no email, there was none of that, especially in Mexico at that time. There was none of that. And so, yeah, we would just write letters, and then the Mexican Postal Service is famously slow. And so, letters would take 3 weeks to get back and forth. And that's how we would communicate, was through letters. And that's a good example of how the world has changed dramatically in a very short amount of time. Even though, like you say, change happens constant and slowly, there's like these touchstones of change that happen that dramatically change things very quickly. And from the time I was dating my wife till now, nobody writes letters anymore. Can you imagine anybody courting somebody nowadays and they're writing them letters? They're texting.
Exactly.
And
yeah, it's changed so fast. And it's funny when you watch television shows, you can really see that. You'll watch a show from 10 years ago and you'll be like, wait, this was 10 years ago? The technology looks like it was 30 years ago. It's
yes.
mind-blowing how quickly it changes.
I know. You look at what the phone they're holding in their hand from 10 years ago, and you're thinking, most people today, they don't even know that those are phones. That's as weird to them as a rotary dial phone. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's so funny because like I told you, I have 2 kids in college. So they were born early 2000s. And then my last 2 children were born at the beginning of last decade, around 2011. So even they have experienced very different worlds in terms of technology.
Yeah, and what's interesting is it's not only changed the technology hasn't only changed in appearance, right? But but what it does and what it means to our life. It's like this: writing letters. That's how you and I communicated with our spouses when we were courting. Now it's constant, incessant texting back and forth between them. It's not just a change in how they're doing it. It's actually a change in what they're doing, which I'm not sure what that implies for going. I mean, there's something to be said, I think, to the value of sitting down and taking time and writing a letter. I know I'm going to sound like a Luddite, and I'm really not trying to say that. But, sitting down, you take the time, you think it out, you write a letter, you write a draft, you rewrite it. It's all handwritten. You send that out, and it takes a week or 2, and then you get a response back. And when you have that form of communication, that that builds into the relationship something different than texting every mundane, vapid thing that pops in your head. You send out a text every 14 seconds to your girlfriend. It's an entirely different thing. I don't know what that'll mean, what this means for relationships going forward.
I don't know either. I mean, I think every era has its adjustments. Obviously, we could still call people on the phone when we were young, but 100 years before that, you couldn't even do that. So there's always adjustments. As a parent, it's a mixed bag. It's kind of tough to know that my son or my daughter could constantly be in contact with their boyfriend or girlfriend, like you said.
Mm.
On the other hand, it is comforting and really reassuring as a parent that you can always reach your child. We actually took a mission trip to Spain last year. I took some students from a Christian school, and just having that constant communication access is so nice when you're traveling. It's so reassuring.
Yes, sets the parents' mind at ease.
Leading a trip.
Yeah, it sets the parents' mind at ease.
Yeah, it sets my mind at ease too as a leader.
Yeah.
Conducting a trip. And if something happens, we're not as stranded as we used to be.
Yes.
My car broke down recently when I was on the way to a church, and I still, even though I was on the way that morning, I still got to the church on time because I had a cell phone. AAA came. Someone was able to pick me up, and I was able to get to the church on time, even with my car breaking down. So there are advantages to the constant contact that we're in right now.
Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't trade it. I'm certainly not advocating that we go back to writing letters. I don't write on a piece of paper hardly ever. About the only paper I like to write on is endorsing a check. That's the only type of paper I like to write on. And even then I'd prefer a bank transfer, right? But
yes,
but I think that with all the great things that come with technology, we also have there comes a lot of responsibility. I mean, just think about the access that we have, like say through the internet, to everything that's good and everything that's very dangerous.
That's right. Yeah, everything's a tool, and tools can be used for good or bad, and powerful tools can be used for powerful good and powerful evil. I totally agree with that. I also think with the technology change, and this is what we tend to feel as time goes on, there is a sense of loss that what you had in the past. And I think that's what you're speaking to with relationships. There is something really special about getting a handwritten letter in the mail. So we'll see. I mean, I think my daughter, for example, she obviously texts a lot, but I think young people, to some degree, they'll still use the old technologies. And sometimes what happens is if something gets old enough, then it comes back around. It's almost like the end thing. So my daughter actually has a record player.
I was just about to say that. Yeah, I was just about to say that. LPs are on their way back, it seems like.
That's right. Yeah, she's got a little record. Now, I bought her the record player, I'm going to be honest, but she likes it. And she started collecting her own records when I got that for her. And you're right, records are available now. They're kind of, it's retro, I guess is what they call it.
I read that there's some people that are actually starting businesses, pressing them, that they've actually got new businesses starting up to press LPs again.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, and it's even an example here on my hat that I'm wearing the old Phillies logo because this is the one I grew up with, So you just tend to long for the past. So I think same with print books. I know that you read a lot online, and I do too. I use a lot of digital technology because it takes up less space than all these books that I have.
I know.
But there is still something special, we all can agree, with actually holding a book in your hand. And in the Bible world, there's actually been a real resurgence of producing really nice quality Bibles because people miss it.
Well, I think what you end up getting with when technology displaces something like, let's say, books or music or other things, what you end up getting, I think, is that when you start going back, then when society goes back and tries to retake some of these old things and bring them forward, they bring them forward sometimes in their best iterations. So before, books are just put out like pulp, they're everywhere. Now, if you're going to buy a book, you're going to buy a special book. It's going to have a special binding. It's going to have very nice paper. You're buying it for the book itself, not for the content anymore. Same with Bibles. It used to be, Bibles, you get all these. Now, if you want a cheap Bible, you get it on your phone. That's free. Right? Mm-hmm. But when you want a nice Bible, then you're going to go get a leather bound. It's going to be well done. It's going to be an Allen binding or something of the similar, right? And you're going to get a really, really nice presentation of it. And it's the actual book itself that you're now looking for. One of the things that we found in Mexico was that that the translation that many of us use down there was getting very hard to find because it's an older translation. And a lot of people who prefer it were concerned because once everyone stops publishing it, then what are you going to do about that? Well, now anyone can get it anytime, anywhere. You just have it on your phone. You can give it to somebody else immediately. We can be talking to somebody, giving them the gospel. If they say, I don't have a Bible, well, it used to be a big deal. Now it's like, well, here, let me share this. You just share it from your phone to their phone, and all of a sudden now they have the Bible. And now it's like any translation is immediately available and no publisher can control them anymore.
Yeah, really interesting. And it makes me think about how in the church world, we tend to go to extremes. And, you of course know people that'll hold on to things and they never want change. And then, of course, you have people that say, well, we have to change. And we do. We have to adapt. But we also have to remember that, eventually things do come back around, So if you think about the hymns in the church, people were always worried, well, we're going to lose the hymns. No, we're not going to lose the hymns.
Yeah.
If a song is already stuck around for 200 years, then it's going to continue to stick around. And the same with a really good Bible translation. If you have a translation like the King James Version, of course, less people are using it today than they used to, but it's going to be around, as long as people are speaking English.
Yeah, exactly. And the technology has made it more so, not less so. Because again,
right.
Now, it's like, where could you ever find a Tyndale Bible 15 years ago? If you wanted to see Tyndale's, you couldn't. Now anybody can have Tyndale's Bible immediately. If you just say, hey, there's a Bible by Tyndale, I want to see that. In 10 seconds, you can have it on your phone.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it's made everything that would look like it had actually been lost to history is now available to everybody. I think it's fantastic. And so I'm able to hear about any translation or any book there is practically and find it immediately and have access to it.
That is so cool. And it makes me think of, we're kind of in that transition like the Reformation was. The Reformation was a change in the church, obviously, but it also coincided with technology changes and that people had access to information they hadn't had access to before. We, of course, now live in this information age, but it's really bringing about a lot of changes, and it's scary. People are really scared, and I understand that, but it's also bringing about, like you said, resurgences of things that have been forgotten because we have access to things so much easier now than we did before.
Exactly. I think it's great, and obviously there's things that there's always going to be dangers to everything but there were to the old things too. I mean, it's not like there weren't problems with any of the old technologies, and so we have to teach people, I think, how to exercise Christian discipline and responsibility, and then enjoy the privileges that God's given us in this time, which are tremendous in my opinion.
Yeah, totally agree with that. The problem with us humans is we're emotional creatures, which isn't just a problem; it's a good thing too. But that's why we react to things the way that we do. We feel deeply about things, and so you feel. And for those of us, I mean, I think a lot of us trying something new as you get older gets harder and harder. I've learned how to do YouTube stuff, but the new technology, I mean, it's always changing,
Yes.
So you get really emotional about things, and that happens, of course, in the church too. We feel really, we just have strong feelings towards certain things, and so that's why it can be very hard for us to just kind of put up with each other as we go through generational changes. because, we look at things differently depending on our generation.
So where does the Christian nerd theme come from? Did you work in technology at all, or are you just a real fan of it?
Yeah, well, I've just observed for myself that I'm just someone who, probably would be classified as a nerd, because I like things that the culture calls nerdy. When I watch YouTube, I'm watching technology stuff, I'm watching science,
Yes.
information stuff. I'm not watching a lot of entertainment. I'll read sometimes novels, but mostly my reading is much more technical or theological or
Mm-hmm.
philosophical. So I'm just
Yes.
kind of nerdy by nature. And I'm a teacher. I like teaching. I like organizing information and explaining things. And then I wear glasses. I've worn glasses almost since I was born. So if you wear glasses that long, you're, I guess, officially a nerd.
Yeah, that inducts you immediately into the nerd family right away. And of
And
course
I've embraced it. I mean,
yes, I
that's
know. I was
our
gonna say
logo,
you.
our glasses.
Yes, I know. That's what I was gonna say. I mean, it's not like you didn't go out and find the nerdiest ones you could get your hands on. That's good.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about it is, when you embrace something, it actually becomes the opposite. Because nerdy is sometimes looked at as not cool. But if you embrace it and you use it, then it kind of becomes cool in its own way.
It
So
does. Well, you rock it, so it works for
thank
you
you.
very well. And so, how's the response been for your YouTube channel and stuff? I know your subscribers are growing. Your videos get more views every time. What's the kind of response you're getting from that?
You mean in terms of how people respond in the comments and
Yeah, and
how they?
and their interaction with it. Are you finding that are you find you're having the effect you're wanting to?
Yeah, I mean, I keep my expectations, I think, pretty realistic when it comes to YouTube. I know that it's not going to get all one kind of reaction, and if anything, I've been really pleasantly surprised by the different viewpoints that have come into the comment section on my videos. I think the tendency when you're on YouTube, if you're going to grow, is to really pick one side and go really strong at that side. But the problem is, it becomes this huge echo chamber where everybody in the comments is just saying, "Yes, what you said is so true. Yes, you are so right." I actually like the fact that my comments are a mixed bag, and it's pretty neat to see people say, "Yeah, I agree with you," or "Yeah, but you didn't go far enough," or they'll say, "No, you're on the wrong side." And to me, that means I'm probably where I want to be, which is
Hmm.
sparking conversation.
Yes. One thing I really like about the way you do your channel is that you're very how would I put it? Very calm about what you have to say. You're not like you're not out there like ranting on it. You present a side. You give credibility to opposing viewpoints. You give voice to it and say I understand that. And I like how you do that. It comes across, I think, in a very Christian spirit. And I
Mm,
think that's a very positive thing.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, I actually had someone call me Mr. Rogers. They think of me like Mr. Rogers a little bit. And then another funny one is you're like the Bob Ross of Christian YouTube.
Oh,
Someone
that's
said,
funny.
compared me to Bob Ross. Those
Well,
are
I've
pretty
been
chill
told that too, but
guys. I
that's
mean,
because I mumble to myself.
the really funny part is that is intentional. I mean, I try to look at things rationally, but it's actually ironic because I am not a inherently calm person. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm, just I have that real emotional type nature, and I get really loud a lot of times when I talk. But I think when I'm presenting things, I'm consciously trying to focus on the information and relate to people. And I know that if I'm explaining something to someone who disagrees, yelling at them or raising my voice tends to be counterproductive a lot of times, especially when you're trying to really get them to listen. Uh, so, yeah, I mean, I think it's an approach I've chosen to take. I was on the debate team when I was in high school, and I think that just teaches you that even if you disagree with a side, you need to learn how to understand that side and even how to argue from that side. And I'm willing to do that on my channel. I will sometimes explain things that I don't totally agree with, but I know that's the best way for people to actually understand the whole situation from different angles.
Correct. Well, yeah, I think you do a very good job at that. It's one of the things I really like about the channel. It's one of the reasons I watch it. I also like how you do the news, kind of, and you do a lot of the reporting on the news, especially right now with the Corona thing, and you do a lot of the MacArthur updates on that. And so I watch a lot of those. Those are interesting because I'm fascinated with what's going on with John MacArthur and how that's all going to play out there in California. That's something else that they got going on out there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, I mean, the truth is I'm not anybody, who's well known, and people don't really, particularly say, oh, I've got to follow that guy, but they're interested in the topics that I'm talking about. And that's been a big topic is the churches that are, especially out in California, where they are dealing with so many tight restrictions out there during the coronavirus situation. And when MacArthur, who's a high profile person, said, we're going to open up in spite of those restrictions, I mean, that drew a lot of attention.
It did.
So I have been riding that wave. I didn't realize, you never know when you put a video out there who's going to hear it and what it's going to do. And when I started putting that information out there, people were really interested. And I have views on those videos that are way bigger than my channel merits.
Correct. Yeah, you're hitting on something that people is salient to them, and when like you say, when somebody of his profile or his stature takes a stand on that, people want to know what's gonna play out on that, especially if they're looking at their church being closed down and they're trying to figure out what to do about it.
Yeah. But I personally benefited. I probably should send a thank you note to John MacArthur.
I think a lot of people should.
He's gotten me a lot of views, and even people out there in California are watching my
There you
channel.
go. There you go.
Sent me a hat.
You've gotten a lot of swag out of it.
I know. Well, I'm actually intentionally doing that now. I'm asking people that watch my channel, if they have a baseball team they like, send me a hat and I'll wear it on my channel.
There you go.
But it's not because I just want to get a lot of hats. I think it's a great way to connect with people.
I agree. I agree. I'm telling people to send me sailboats. So no, I'm joking. I don't want to. No, I'm joking. Do not send me sailboats. One's enough.
Or globes. You have globes back there.
Yeah, I do. I have globes. So this is the Robert Rodriguez studio decorating system, where you go through the house and you find everything that your wife no longer wants, and you hang it on your walls.
Oh.
That's what this is.
That's good.
Yeah.
That works.
Yeah.
That's good.
So tell me.
At least she wasn't, just giving you like really girly stuff, and you have like.
Well, she did at first. You should have seen the stuff I had originally that she wanted me to put up. She kept bringing in things. I'm like, there's no way I'm putting that back there. You're crazy. What? It's beautiful. No.
That's the problem.
I know. That's the problem.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's where we compromised on with what I have back there right now. I got a bunch of fake books, and I have the one, I don't know if you can see it from up there. I got one real book up there, which is the Gulag Archipelago. That's my book. And then the rest of them are fake books.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, these back here are real books. I mean,
I see that.
I actually can read those.
I have that book, but I actually read it on my Kindle, not on the book itself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I actually have quite a few old Bibles. So when I was in Mexico, I went down to Mexico has some of the oldest bookstores in the New World, because Mexico City is one of the oldest cities in the New World. And so they have a whole street in Mexico City of old antiquarian bookstores. But they're not, you can go in and they got books in there that are hundreds of years old, and you can just grab them and look at them. There's no like glass or anything. You can just take them down and leaf through them if you want. And so I went down and we found dozens of old Bibles printed back before the like at the beginnings of the 1800s, some of them, and bought them. So I got a whole stack of very, very old books from doing that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now you can get the content of them on Kindle. So now I just have them for the book themselves. We originally did that because we wanted to look at how the translation in Spanish had developed from the late 1700s when they made the first one through the 1960s when the most popular one has been made. So that's why we originally did it.
Don't you also have pictures of that stolen book?
No. Yeah. I bought a Bible on eBay. And it's one of the first Bibles ever translated into Spanish. And it was being sold out of England. So I bid on it. It cost a ton of money. But I won it. And so they sent it to me. And then like 6 months later, I get an email from Scotland Yard telling me that it was stolen from a library and I had to return it. Can you believe? And at first I thought, nah, this is a scam. I thought, because who gets an email from Scotland Yard? And I'm in Mexico. And so I thought, nah, this is a scam. And I almost deleted the email. And then I thought, well, the Christian in me said, you can't leave it there. So I go online and I look it up, and it's in all the papers in England at the time that some librarian had been stealing all their expensive books and selling them on eBay. So I had to send it back.
Yeah, you really don't want to be known as a pastor or as a Christian who steals Bibles.
No, it's like I stole this Bible because I wanted to read the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, you started reading it and you're like, I got to give it back.
Yes, I know. It's like, and that was a moral dilemma because I was like, I did not want to send that Bible back.
Oh, I bet not.
No,
Yeah.
And especially they weren't offering reimbursement or shipping. It was like I had to send it back at my cost, at my expense. And so I sent it back. And then, I don't know, like 3 months later, I got a check in the mail for the book. They paid me back.
Oh, that's good.
I'm assuming it's because I'm like one of the only people that actually returned the book. Because there was no way they could have done anything about it. Scotland Yard wasn't going to send a detective to Mexico to go recover a book. So... Wow. Yeah, it actually worked out real well, and that was back when the pound had gained a tremendous amount of value against the dollar, and so they sent it back to me in pounds. So I actually made money on the whole deal. And then what I did is before I sent it back, I took photographs of every page. So I actually have the book in photographs and the money. So it came out real well.
That's good.
Not bad.
It's nice to say that you held that in your hands.
Yes.
You actually possessed it for a time. I actually have a Bible that someone in our church lent to me. I don't have it right now, but I have reviewed it on my channel. It's from 1736, and it was a German Bible.
Oh,
that
wow.
was brought over when people were fleeing Europe at the time, coming to America. And so this is a very, very old Bible from before our country was birthed. And the family has it, and I'm holding it, and it
Wow.
feels weird to hold something that old. I mean, it almost feels wrong. Like, we really should have this in an airtight museum, you know?
Yeah. That's crazy. That Bible I had bought, so the Spanish Inquisition was actually still going on in Mexico until the mid 1800s. They actually still burned a person at the stake in the mid 1800s in Mexico City. So this Bible, of course, all Protestant Bibles were outlawed under that regime, and so in Mexico, all Protestant Bibles, in fact, all vulgar language Bibles were outlawed. The only thing permitted was the Latin Vulgate, and so that Bible, the Inquisition or the Catholic Church approved that Bible to be translated, and the reason why was because there was a very large Jewish demographic, Spanish-speaking Jewish demographic in the world at the time, and the Catholic Church wanted to try to convert the Jews. And so they translated the Bible into Spanish. They allowed it to be translated and distributed to the Jews. And so you have this very, very old Bible. It's It's the only Protestant Bible in Spanish from the era. And it was allowed to be done by the Catholic Church because they were trying to convert the Jews to Catholicism. And that's where that Bible came from. Very strange, very interesting story because all other Bibles were outlawed at that time.
Wow, that is so neat. And you said that was from eBay?
Yeah, I got that on eBay. That's where I bought a lot of stuff. Back when I was doing that kind of research, I bought, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 old Bibles in Spanish. A lot of them, they just were everywhere. People didn't know really what they had. And so if they took pictures of them, then I could kind of see I could figure out what it was and if it was worth getting.
That is cool.
Yeah.
That's great.
So how did you get to writing the book? Tell us a little bit about that journey. Because it's very interesting to me to find someone who's actually written a book. A lot of people talk about wanting to do it, but that's a lot of work.
20s. What was that?
I'm sorry, we skipped out the front. I said a lot of people talk about wanting to write a book, but it's actually a great deal of work to write a book. So I'm very curious on your journey on that.
Yeah, and I started it actually when I was in my mid-20s, and I wrote basically the whole manuscript, a rough draft of it, and then set it aside and just, I thought it would be a neat thing to put out there, but I knew it wasn't really ready, and I still needed to work on it and refine it. And then like 10 years later, I think close to 10 years later, I said, you know what? I'm going to pull this back out and maybe consider self-publishing it and putting it out there, partly just for the exercise, of going through that process of writing a book and actually putting my thoughts down and then putting it out there and hoping that maybe it will, have some sort of an impact. Someone will read it and be impacted by it. And, it's something I wanted to write because it was really something that was important to me to share the gospel for our context that we live in. But it also just gave me the opportunity to kind of hone my skills and work on those so that maybe I could continue to write in the future.
And have you done any writing yet since then?
Yep. I mean, I actually have been, I went back into schooling again, and I have a doctor of ministry now in church planting and multiplication that I finished up the beginning of this year.
Oh, congratulations.
So, I wrote my thesis, so that was time consuming. But I also this year have been working on a little booklet on Bible translation.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm hoping that I tend to do this. I'll write something and then I'll be like, okay, I don't know that it's really ready, and I'll set it aside and then I'll, eventually pull it out and finally finalize it. But I haven't gotten to the point of finalizing it yet, but I have written pretty much all of it.
And what can you share about that one on translation? What's the view of it, or what is it your goal is in that?
Well, you might know that on my channel I have Bible translation videos.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I started doing that is because it's a topic I'm interested in, but also people are so curious about it, and it's just such a big topic, it's overwhelming. So I was trying to just present the basics of each translation and put it on the bottom shelf in a very accessible way for people to understand, so that, we could kind of, there's a lot of academic issues involved with it, but the average person is just going to get bogged down, and they don't know.
Yes.
And so I wanted to do something that, would take what I've done on those videos and put it in a book form so that people could just say, oh, okay, so that helps me understand, even though I don't know a lot about Bibles and Bible translation, I can read this book and have a good enough understanding so that I know what I'm doing when I choose a translation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just to help the layperson.
It's kind of like a primer then on translations. What's behind them, how they go about, and what to look at and things. Basically, right? It'd be like a primer.
It would be. I would even say, yeah, that, but in a very, very basic sense. I think one of the problems, especially for people that are more academic, is you tend to go so far with the details, and that is great for some people, but for a lot of people, it doesn't help them, and it's confusing and unnecessary, or they just won't pick up a book if it's huge.
Yes.
So I wanted something that's just going to really give people a basic understanding of Bible translation, what Bible translation is about, how people go about it, what the different philosophies are, and what the different translations that are out there are, and what it is they're actually choosing when they choose a particular translation. And also, of course, to clear up some of the issue of the King James version, which in the English speaking world is always a big issue.
Mm-hmm.
You have so many people out there, and people get confused. They're watching the internet and they're like, I just want to find a Bible, and they've got all these people telling them they have to use the King James version. So I wanted to help with that as well.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. I'll be look forward to when you publish it and be able to read it. Hopefully that won't take. Hopefully you won't sit on it too long so we can see
Yeah,
it.
I think I will try to get it finished up in the next few months.
Oh, nice. Well, let us know when you do. We'll definitely look forward to seeing that. How did you get this one published? Did you self-publish this?
Yes, I did. Yeah, and mixed feelings about that in retrospect. I don't think it would have ever gotten published if I said I've got to have a publisher pay for it. So in some ways that was good, but at the same time, when you self-publish, you are putting your own money out there, and
Mm.
and depending on your own efforts to get it out there. So it was good. I think overall, I'm happy that I did it. It's also been a great conversation piece like we're having today, to be able to say, yeah, I did write something and we can talk about it.
Yes.
So yeah, that's basically how I went about it. Just published it myself, or paid for it.
Right, right. I liked how I really enjoyed reading the book. I thought it was a very interesting take on what could have been just a standard apologetics about, is there a God, why is there a God type thing, but it morphed into a gospel message, and I just thought that was a very unique and a very interesting take on, because I mean I watch a lot of videos and I read a lot of literature, and all fine stuff. I'm not knocking anything. It's, there's a lot of people out like William Lane Craig and James White, and these people are doing a lot of work on this subject. But I liked how this approach was, because it just very naturally flowed into a gospel presentation of the apologetic truths that you deal with at the beginning.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple reasons for that. I mean, I grew up just immersed in the biblical world, and my dad being a pastor himself, and I was exposed to that, and I just really believe that we have to use the scripture when we give the gospel. And Paul in the book of Romans gives a classic presentation of the gospel. Obviously, people talk about the Romans road. But then you have people like C.S. Lewis, who are great philosophers and great at communicating to the average person. But he tended to get a little too far away from the Bible, in my opinion. And so I really wanted to combine the two ideas. Like, okay, yeah, C.S. Lewis is great at engaging the culture, but let's combine that with a real biblical stream. And I used largely the book of Romans to present the gospel, but it kind of did it in C.S. Lewis fashion.
Yes, yes, exactly. And I like it. I like the way that you did that, and I like I also really appreciated the very personal touches you have in there, like when your brother-in-law had his car accident, and you had that in, which was in my way of reading. I read that and I think, wow, that's not something you normally will find in a book like this. That's actually pretty personal and pretty visceral, really, the whole experience you went through there.
Yeah. And when I started writing that book, it was only a few years after that happened, with my brother-in-law dying suddenly in a car accident. So, I mean, if you've experienced something like that, that sticks with you. It never leaves you when you go through something that tragic. But just a few years after it happened, it was still, just a looming part of our lives. And yeah, but tragedy is often the connection point with people, because one of the hangups we have as humans is, why in the world would God allow this to happen? If he's really there, why does he allow tragedy? But it's also a great opportunity to really connect with people on the deepest level, because we all go through things that there's just no perfect explanation for from our limited standpoint. So yeah, I shared it because it was personal, but I also felt like it was a vehicle for explaining the gospel, helping to explain the gospel, and connect with people in their pain, because we all go through these things, and life is hard to understand, and so in some ways we're all just trying to make sense of it. And I wanted to say something that showed that I have a hard time making sense of it too, but here's how I understand it as a Christian.
Mm. You have a phrase or a sentence in your book on this that I thought was very profound. It made me. I'm still thinking about it. It's still processing. You write that tragedies such as this are evidence that God permits circumstances that a merely benevolent Creator would never allow.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
I like that.
I appreciate that. I think we tend to oversimplify things. And I think one of the things I'm trying to do in the book is shape people's understanding about when they use the word God, what do they even mean by that? And we all are struggling. I don't think we can fully understand God. I really don't. But I think sometimes we want to just see one aspect of God, and we tend to look at it in a very simplistic way. But to have a biblical understanding and an accurate understanding, we have to see everything. And we know that God is love, and I talk about that in the book. He gave us the most profound display of love in sending Jesus. But you don't even understand that love if you don't understand the other aspects of God's nature. So I'm trying to give people the fuller perspective of the God of the Scripture.
Yes. I agree, and the you know the to me the brilliance of that sentence you write is how you say that God is not merely a benevolent creator. There's more to it than that. It seems to me, and you correct me if I'm misunderstanding, but the way I read it and I think about that is that the point that the gospel is making, and I think it makes it throughout the scripture, is that while God loves us, God loves humanity, that he is serving, if you want to call it that, or he is pursuing would be a better word, a far grander purpose than simply what we think would be the most loving action towards ourselves, and that he serves his glory, which you make, I think, the point through the book that God is pursuing his glory, and that is that was is gonna require certain circumstances that we're not going to understand or appreciate always.
Yeah, that's right. And I think I try to explain it. I know that sometimes we have to be careful because, obviously when someone's going through something hard, I think trying to give rational explanations is not always helpful. We just want to comfort people and love them. But to understand that in our own experience in life, you go to watch a movie. Would you ever want to watch a movie where the whole plot was everything was good the whole time? Everything was good the whole time. There was nothing bad that ever happened. The movie starts good and the plot line is just flat. When you're done with that movie, you would walk away saying, that was so boring. I didn't like that movie. And I really believe that God is the greatest author. And in history, he's telling his story, as people have said. And when you actually take a step back, you say, yeah, this is an amazing world we live in, and it couldn't tell the story it tells unless he shaped it the way that he did. Now, that creates things we don't like, but those things we don't like actually make for things that we end up liking even more, just like a movie.
Yes.
When you're done with that movie, you say, I don't really like some of the things that happened, but I'm glad that they happened in the context of that story, because when the story was over, it was an awesome ending and so satisfying. And movies are just a reflection of something we experience in our own lives. So again, we have a hard time making sense of it, just like a character in a book would. If you just took them in one chapter, they might say, "What is the author doing? Why did they put me in this situation?" But at the end of the story, it makes so much more sense from the author's perspective. And if we see life from that outside perspective, then it helps us to make more sense out of why God is doing what He's doing.
Yes, I agree. You know, on that subject or on that point, you also write in the book, and you use an illustration that I really enjoyed. I liked it because it simplified and brought down, like you say, to the bottom shelf, something that some people might find somewhat difficult. But you use the analogy of the Agatha Christie novels and how you have these detective, right, and he's so brilliant, and he looks around the room and he figures everything out. And the reader can get lost in the story and think, wow, this detective is brilliant. And then you point out that really the detective is brilliant because the author has written that into him. And you're illustrating, right, the inspiration of the scriptures and how they have this insight and this wisdom, the biblical authors do. And it's not that they were necessarily that brilliant in and of themselves, even though they might well be more brilliant than all of us naturally. But even that would not be sufficient. If they had been the most brilliant people on earth, it would not be sufficient for the insight, the knowledge, and the constant truthfulness of all statements they made in their writing. And so what you're pointing out is that God, as the author, right, he has written into the story this whole scenario, which I thought was a really, really cool illustration. I liked how you worked that out.
Yeah, thank you. I grew up with my mom really loved Agatha Christie, so I think that's partly why I ended up with that example. But that always struck me. You know, you have these detectives, and it's like, how do they know? And actually, my wife and one of my daughters, we've been watching Monk recently, that TV show Monk, the
Yes.
detective. You know,
Uh-huh.
and it's funny, but it's the same thing. It's like they have inside information.
Yes.
They always, oh, well, I could have figured out if I had known all of that, but it looks really cool from the outside because you're seeing someone who has this information that they're able to piece together. And that's what I read in the Bible. People that are piecing things together that when you look at it, you say, yeah, that really does fit together. That really makes sense. And I think, yeah, that's a really good description of what we read in the Bible. I think that the apologetic or the defense that the book is giving of Christianity is really along that lines. It is really trying to show people that the Bible really does look at the world in a way that puts things together, that you can look at the world through different lenses. And if you look at it through an evolutionary lens, if the world was just here by chance, it would look a certain way. But the biblical view of the world just makes so much sense out of all of the different facets of our existence, particularly for us as humans.
Mm.
And I just think that's so important, because why do humans even ask the questions that they ask? I find that so fascinating. I can't understand, if we were just here by chance, why would we even be asking what our purpose is? And yet we ask that. So the Bible does piece those facets of our experience and existence together in a way that just adds clarity. And I use glasses a lot as an illustration because I wear them, but I've also used the illustration of, I have a eyesight problem and I can't see the right way with both of my eyes working together. So if I go to a 3D movie theater, if I go to a 3D movie, I can't see the 3D the way other people can,
Really?
because my eyes don't work together. And so I'll go to a movie like that and people will be like, whoa, and they'll be reacting, but I cannot see it. And that's how it is when you're looking at the world and you put on the lens of scripture. It's like you're able to see in 3 dimensions. You're able to fully see it. But a lot of people have never really had that full experience of seeing it through that lens.
Yes, that's a good way of putting that. you in the book you also you deal with that also, and you a little on and you point out, and this is a point that I've made as well in the past, is that how science looks at the world and they see that anything that's basically before the Enlightenment is retarded, right? Is stupid, and anything's after the Enlightenment that comes from their camp, that's brilliance. And so the Bible obviously is in the stupid camp for them. They look at it and it's like this quaint. And how can anything written before the 1800s be true? Because and people, I think, buy into that because they think, well, they didn't have computers and they didn't have televisions and they didn't have telephones and they didn't have all this technology, right? They didn't have these scientific advancements. They didn't understand physics the way we do or whatever. And they think, well, then but the point you make and you actually, I think, deal with this in your book. And the point you make is that what the Bible presents is insight into the human aspect of things. Right? The Bible, and I think it's a mistake that Christians make where they try to dig scientific truths or facts out of the Bible, trying to go back in the Bible and retroactively read into it, right? The second law of thermodynamics, or retroactively read into it the E equals MC squared or whatever, right? I think that's silly. I don't think the Bible ever pretends to be a scientific literature. It's not about that stuff, in my view. My view is the Bible is dealing with the way human beings have been created in the likeness and image of God, and what that implies for their existence and what responsibilities that confers to them. And I think you make that point really well.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, it's what C.S. Lewis called chronological snobbery.
Exactly. I have that written down.
Cited him on that.
Yes.
We know better now. And it's a mistake. It's because we look at our computers and we think we're better. But an analogy that I would use to explain the difference is like, I live in a very blue-collar area right now, and maybe a lot of people around here where I live aren't college educated. And college-educated people have a certain kind of knowledge. But what I have noticed about people that live in my area, my father-in-law, for example, he built his own house. You get a lot of college-educated people together, and they would not be able to build their own house.
No.
He has a level of knowledge and an experiential knowledge and hands-on knowledge that a lot, people in more academic circles actually don't even have. And yet they could think they're better because of their degrees. And I think we're that way, because we have scientific knowledge, we think we're better than people of the past, but they had a different skill set and a way of looking at the world. And sometimes their skill set allowed them to look at things more perceptively than even we might be today, typically. So, there's a lot to be learned from people of the past. And let's face it, technology works both ways. We might be able to do more and have more information at our disposal, but we have a lot more distractions. People that were biblical writers, just imagine how much time they had to think deeply about matters and to really be able to converse with others on a deep, deep level. And we're so distracted today, we miss that.
Ravi Zacharias, you probably have heard him say this because he has a famous illustration that he would give about Sherlock Holmes and Watson. They're out camping. You know what I'm talking about? They're out. Have you heard this? Where Sherlock Holmes and Watson are camping, and Sherlock Holmes wakes Watson up in the middle of the night and says, "Watson, look at those stars and tell me what you see." And Watson looks up and he tries to emulate his Sherlock Holmes. So he says, well, the ontological is this, and if I look at it cosmologically, it's this, and if I look at it physically, it's this, and he goes through all the different ways. And then Sherlock finally says, Watson, you idiot, they stole our tent.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so, I mean,
eyes in the wrong place.
Yeah, what I find with this Enlightenment fascination, which I'm all for. I like scientific advancement and I like technology, and but this what would you call it? This fanaticism that anything useful or meaningful or truthful had to come out of the Enlightenment, and that nothing existed before that. Well, that's not even understanding what the Enlightenment was as being the formulation of ideas that pre-existed long before that, and things that were been building up and built, and the Enlightenment was built on a foundation, especially of the New Testament and of the Sermon on the Mount. But beyond being confused by that, I think that what they're doing is that they're not realizing that knowing how things work is not the same thing as knowing why they work or what they do or what to do with them. So they have all this technical knowledge about how things work, or at least they think they do.
Yeah.
But what difference does that make if your family isn't any better off, right? If your society is ripping itself apart and burning itself down, then what use is all this enlightenment from? I mean, we look at the stuff going on, the rioting and things going on in this last year, and so many of these people are highly enlightened when it comes to college degrees, right? There's a good percentage of them are that way, and yet if they don't love their neighbor as themselves, then which document or which source of understanding is more accurate? The one that would teach us to love our neighbors as ourselves, and maybe we don't get everything right about physics, or the ones that can measure the weight of a photon or whatever, but they can't get along with their neighbor?
Yeah. It reminds me of how humans cannot appreciate that what they are doing is built upon something that has already been handed by them by the very people or context that they are arguing against. It's kind of like how teenagers will maybe buck against their parents, not remembering that the only reason they have anything they have is because of their parents. And I think the same with the Enlightenment. You have to be careful. Of course, the Enlightenment gave us some things that were very helpful, and we have made advancements. But the Enlightenment owes some debt to what came before it. It didn't just come out of nowhere. And actually, for those who argue against Christianity, they really need to understand Christianity set the stage for a lot of the things that came about in the Enlightenment. And one evidence of this, how we can just look in such a simplistic and prejudiced way of people of the past, is we think they were so, they didn't have the knowledge and the ability that we have today. But look at the cathedrals. I got to go, like I said, to Spain last year, and I am telling you, those cathedrals put buildings we have today. Those things were, I would argue, more amazing by far than a lot of what we build today. So, you could look at that. You think of the pyramids, right? I mean,
yes,
those were built a pretty long time ago too, I think, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like people were pretty smart back then, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, and take one of these architects or engineers and tell them and take one who's never learned anything, deprive them of all knowledge, building knowledge that has accumulated over thousands of years, and say, go build a skyscraper. Those skyscrapers are going to your point. Those skyscrapers are possible because they are building upon the principles laid out from thousands of years of learning and trial and error and practical application to know what works and what doesn't work.
That's such a great point. And I think the Bible could be looked at as something that is very much akin to what we're talking about. It is spiritual knowledge. It is inspired knowledge, I would say, but it is accumulated knowledge that God gave to people over a period of time. And he revealed what we call progressive revelation. People understood more and more clearly as God unfolded his plan. And he's continuing to do that in the church today, obviously. But the scriptures give us a foundation, a collective knowledge that we are really building upon.
Correct. You mentioned about how, children, and using the illustration or the analogy of children who think they're so much smarter than their parents. And it's interesting because they think that because they have a college degree that their parents paid for. and they come home and throw it in their face, and they're like, I'm smarter than you because I have this college degree. And it's like, well, I paid for it. I mean, how smart can you actually be, right? It's not exactly. I make sure to remind my kids that every day. If you're so smart, then why did you need me?
That's right.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, and we have to be reminded of that, and that's true today. So many people, and that's happening in our culture right now. In America, uh, it's fine. We should have the freedom to make criticisms, but we need to keep that in check, because the reason that we have the ability to make criticisms in our country is because of what people have stood for, fought for, and died for. And so we also have a lot that we should respect and be thankful for in this country, regardless of our viewpoint politically.
Correct. Speaking of that, what is your take on everything that's going on with the election? How do you see that?
Oh, well, that's a dangerous question.
A little bit.
Yeah, and that's one of the ones where the comment section on my YouTube video, very heated, especially right now. People are just they're in that sense of grief. When people go through something that is not what they want, they grieve, and it's hard for them to accept. And so I think that's the stage we're in right now, because I think that there's a lot of evidence pointing to Biden becoming president. But that's hard for a lot of people to accept. And, of course, we don't know the future. We don't know what will happen. But based on what I see right now, it seems like Biden has the upper hand. But I take a step back politically, and I say, if you are Republican in your politics, overall, this political cycle was actually much better for the Republicans than I think a lot of people predicted. So you almost have to set aside the whole presidency situation, because Donald Trump is just a very lightning rod figure. Mm-hmm. And he draws a lot of attention, but he also draws a lot of positive and negative attention. And so that's what you saw in this election about the presidency. But what a lot of people aren't noticing, someone like Ben Shapiro pointed it out really well, that the Republicans actually have a lot of good signs going for them, not only for this election, but maybe into the future as well. So, I just think when I look at the situation, people are really, their attention is really being drawn to the presidency, but we have to remember the bigger picture.
I agree. What was interesting to me about Trump, and I voted for him both elections. Mm-hmm. Never have liked him very much. Was not my choice in the primaries. I was not on board with him. I've never been on the Trump train myself. My wife definitely is, but not me. But I voted for him because I stand against abortion, and I'm a free market capitalist, laissez-faire. So he doesn't check all those boxes, right? I don't think he's free. I don't think he's a free market capitalist the way I am. He wants restrictions. He wants to put on, tariffs and things like that, which I don't agree with on a policy level. But that's like way down on my list of things that I care about, or that would determine I'm not going to vote libertarian over that. So, but anyways, I voted for him. But one thing that surprised me about him was how consistent he was in the judiciary in appointing the judges that go along with what my value systems are. And I was very surprised at that. And what really surprised me is that he didn't hold off on appointing Comey Barrett this last time. I was very surprised. I thought that was politically was probably not a smart move. I would have thought that politically he should have said, as soon as I get reelected, we're going to put in a conservative or a strict constitutionalist as a judge. You would have that thing to hold out to motivate people to come and vote for you that otherwise might not. I think there's a lot of Republicans, and I think this is seen in the polling data that's come out. A lot of Republicans voted down ticket for senators, Republican senators, that didn't vote for Trump. So they voted for Biden, and then they voted Republican all the way down the rest of the ticket. I think he could have politically maneuvered that nomination to convince many of those people to not do that. And I think that they look at it and say, we got our judge in, we have our majority in the court, and now he's served his purpose. I don't know that that's the case, but it just reads that way to me.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought of that. That would be one way of looking at it. Unfortunately, there's so many uncontrolled factors, because even if he did that, would it have been enough numbers different to change the results? Possibly, because the numbers are very close. But it's hard to say. But I will say from my own standpoint that I'm personally glad he did what he did, because he did the sure thing. You never know what's going to happen in an election, but he made the appointment for the court while he had the opportunity to do it. And so that, again, looking at the larger picture, is really encouraging if you are more on a conservative side, that now the court leans a little more conservative. Even if Trump isn't voted in as president this time, he already really achieved something very, very good from a conservative standpoint on the court.
Absolutely, and that's my point. I really admire the fact that he did do that, because to me, the political savvy, the political wisdom would have been to hold that out as a carrot on the end of a stick, and he didn't. He just went through and did it, and I think in my view, I would say, if I was advising him, right, I would say, you're spending your capital. You're going to spend it, and you're not going to have it later. And I really admire that he did that. And like you say, there's no guarantee that would have won the election, right? He could have lost the election, and then they wouldn't have had that. So I'm even though I'm not on the Trump train, I'm very much admire him on the issues of judiciary appointments, not just from the Supreme Court level. I mean, he's appointed, he's nominated, and had confirmed hundreds of constitutionalist judges across. And as much as that, I read that the ninth district is even been flipped over to be more strict constitutionalist, which is a tremendous achievement. So I think on the judiciary front, he's been a very effective president from a conservative perspective.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we have to take a step back and keep looking at the bigger picture. And many Christians, we were praying for this election, but we sometimes forget when we're praying that we are hopefully of the mindset that God knows better than we do. And so if the results end up being that Biden is president, we have to trust the Lord with those results. If you're voting for Trump, you have to trust God with the results. And I think there's a lot of good signs. I wonder if one of the reasons the left is so upset about Trump is because actually, in many ways, they're not getting their way on a larger scale in our political system. There are a lot of things that are continuing to at least stay middle of the road, if not move more conservative. So I think this election cycle, aside for if you were really hoping Trump to be president, this election cycle had a lot of positive aspects to it from a conservative standpoint.
I think I agree with that completely, and I hope that I have friends and family members who are pretty distraught over all this, and I would like if they were, I would like for those, especially those of them that are Christians, to realize that even if we were to nominate and get elected the perfect candidate that we could imagine, it would not be enough. That wouldn't, if any Christian thinks that was going to usher in the kingdom, that's going to usher in, world peace and righteousness, it's not. It just simply is not going to do it. Christians need to realize that we vote as citizens, but we trust in God as Christians, right? And until Christ comes back and he actually establishes perfect peace and righteousness, it's not going to exist.
That's such a great point. And one of the beauties of our system is the acknowledgement that our forefathers had, that humans are not perfect and that we have to have systems of checks and balances. And even the two-party system is about, keeping things in tension. So when Trump was president, he got a certain amount done, but he was still limited by the Congress. And the same thing for Joe Biden. I'm sure he's going to get a certain amount done, and push his agenda, but he's limited. And again, I'm not sure what happened with the Senate this time, but from what I understand, I don't think it's flipping Democrat.
It doesn't look like it. We'll see what happens. I mean, there's still there's still an outside chance, but I think it's kind of like the presidential race on the flip side, that right now the preponderance of evidence is it's going to be Republican. There's an outside chance that they can get a couple races pulled back and change, and that would flip it. But I don't think most people are too confident in that. Just like in the president, Donald Trump has a path to victory, but it's a very, very uncertain one. I don't see it happening.
And I look at this situation probably a lot like you, because I was not, a dyed-in-the-wool Trump fan myself.
Yeah.
So I'm not reeling from this election as emotionally as some people. I feel like Trump was a mixed bag. Overall, I was pretty happy with things he could control directly, like appointing judges, or even how we deal with wars. He is the commander-in-chief.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty awesome, the way he's dealt with things internationally overall, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But with things he can't control, he tends to be just this over-the-top person, and just create. I'm a little relieved that we're not going to have, if he's not the president, we're not going to have that constant attention drawn to him over and over. It just is tiring.
I agree. No, I completely agree. And while I would have never voted for any candidate who was for abortion, I'm very close to a single issue voter in that sense, personally. But if they would have had Andrew Yang running, and he would have won, I would have been okay with it. I'd been like, okay, fine. That's not who I would vote for because of his abortion stance. If he would moderate on that and run as a Republican, I would have voted for him over Donald Trump. There's a lot of things about Yang I like, right? And that's just me. I'm not pushing. I'm not campaigning for Yang. I'm just saying as an example. And there's others, right? If let's say Tulsi Gabbard maybe or someone like that, I wouldn't have voted for him, but I'd be like, yeah, okay, we could do worse. But with Biden, I almost think we can't do worse. I'm sorry. I'm not a partisan, but it's like, oh, wow. I don't know about this. But at the same time, I think about Obama when he had the House and he had the Senate for a short amount of time, and it was him, and he had all that. And they didn't really do much when he had all the power. And so I'm hopeful that the system of government that the U.S. has is so slow moving, it's so mired in molasses or in the swamp or whatever verbiage you want to use, right? That you basically no one's going to get anything done on any side. And I think that's good. I think the best form of government is one that just can't do anything.
Yeah. And again, from a conservative standpoint, the way that the left tended to get things done when they really wanted to push something through was through the courts. And the courts have changed a lot.
Yes.
Especially we know the Supreme Court has shifted. So, of course, the Supreme Court, you never know how they're going to rule on something. You really don't. But at least now they're not quite so left-leaning as they were before. So it's really interesting. Joe Biden's fascinating, too, because he is who he is, but he's obviously waning in his capabilities. Mm-hmm. From a physical and, to some degree, mental standpoint. And it's sad, actually. I mean, I always feel bad seeing someone decline. But, he's potentially our president this term, and he's declining already. So now we're looking at, what does that even mean? Is it going to really be Biden, or is Kamala Harris going to end up having to step in?
Yeah, or is it going to be his chief of staff, or, who's going to be pulling the strings? It's hard to know. I don't know. I see what people are saying. At the same time, I hear Biden when he's not on a teleprompter and he's speaking from himself, and he sounds a lot better. And so I don't know if he just needs glasses and doesn't want to wear them because of how that would look on TV, or if he's just not good at reading a teleprompter or whatever. But I hear him when he's talking, and he seems to be a lot better than what the replay is on the constant loop on cable news. They'll pick some flub he does and replay it a million
True.
times,
True.
and all of a
I
sudden you're like,
agree.
he's a
Some of it
blithering
is,
idiot.
yeah.
And
Some of it is just that he is being portrayed by one side in a very over the top way. I understand that, but I do think that when you actually look at Biden, just looking at how he conducted his campaign. Now, maybe he had other reasons for doing this, but he put a lot of lids on his campaign.
yeah,
And I think that speaks to he has to be well rested to speak well. He also speaks well when he is doing something that he has a lot of mental muscle memory for. So he's been in politics a long time. So he can just talk very eloquently without thinking much. And he can do that in a debate. You could watch him in the debate just go back to certain lines and he can repeat those lines. But when he has to think on the spot about something deep and he's not well rested, that's where I think he struggles more. And that doesn't mean he's in huge decline, but he's he is an older man.
yeah.
And he is giving evidence, especially if you watch videos of him now, even when he's doing well, versus him 4 or 5 years ago.
Correct.
And that's where you can really see it.
No, you can. You can see that he's aged. There's no doubt about that. And I think you're right on that. I think working from the assumption or from the hypothesis that he be the next president, obviously, one, I think you would agree with me that our hope then is that he have God give him tremendous mental acuity for 4 years, right? I certainly do not want a dumb president. Nobody should want that. There should be no joy in a Christian if he goes into full decline and all happy about that. I would rather have Joe Biden than Kamala Harris as president, personally. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that if he's the president, that God gives him, a dose of mental acuity that surpasses anyone else. That'd be great. But another thing I think also is that we have to remember that in modern times, we've made the presidency about showmanship and being able to speak into the camera and be able to articulate thoughts on the fly. Well, that's really not the job of the president. That's like saying that a CEO of a company has to be able to do a good earnings call in order to be a good CEO. These are very different skill sets, really. And in times past, you wouldn't have that because you didn't have TV and radio, and before that happened. And presidents were about, could they make good decisions and could they think about something slowly and come to a good decision? Could they get together a good team of counselors and deal with issues? Were they good administrators? Were they good executives? That's what they were. And now it's turned into whatever we see on TV, we think that's going to translate into being a good president, which is why I think we get a lot of bad presidents. We get the guys who look good on the debate stage and are just no good at all when it comes to knowing what to do, how to control the Senate, how to wrangle the House. I mean, there's so many elements that come into play there that have nothing at all to do with whether or not you're glib.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree in a lot of ways with you. I think the presidency is certainly an executive role and a lot more just like a CEO in some ways. I do think that there is a public element to it, obviously. Mm-hmm. I think it's more the mood that the presidency reflects and can impact the mood of the country. I actually came on the scene right as Jimmy Carter was ending his first term. I was born in '79, and the sense I got, of course, I could be wrong, but the sense I got is just that there was almost like a kind of a negative mood that the country kind of felt. And, whether he was totally at fault, I can't say, but that just became the mood. Whereas when Reagan came in, he had the ability to promote an optimism. And, so there's an aspect of the presidency where he can affect the way the country perceives itself and the world around it. And every president, to some degree, does that. That's one reason you want a president, is so you have someone to look to, like in a time of war, to say, okay, what are we doing? Yeah. And let's face it, some presidents are better in certain circumstances than in other circumstances. There are some presidents I would probably rather have in a war, and other presidents that I would rather have in a time of peace. We are in a time of peace. generally speaking. So, I don't know how that will look for Biden, but in some ways, I guess we don't really need as much attention on the president right now because we are in a time more of peace. But
Yeah.
there's different aspects to the presidency. But yeah, I agree. I think Kamala Harris, if you're more conservative, you definitely don't want to have her in
Yes.
office.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, to your point, that was the case with Winston Churchill, right? He was in
Yeah.
time of war, he was great, and as soon as the war was over, they voted him out. He was gone. He was not the one they wanted to run the peace. They wanted him to make war, not peace.
That's a good point, and I wonder if Trump fills that role to some degree. Again, I know it's hard for people to accept what might be happening right now, but maybe the reason he was voted in is because our culture was at a point where we felt we needed to pull back in a certain direction, almost like a war of the culture.
Mm.
But he got us past a certain hump. And I don't know that there's quite the urgency now. Just like you said, now that the conservatives have the Supreme Court, what do they really need Trump for the way they did 4 years ago?
Mm-hmm. Correct. And I don't know that anyone else that was running for. I voted for in the primary for Cruz, even though I was very torn on that because I'm not sure about his legal status as even a candidate for the president. I mean, I'm not even sure what to think about that, right? Because I mean, everyone was disqualifying Obama over the birther conspiracy because he supposed he wasn't actually born in Hawaii, is what some people say. I think it's nonsense, but that's the conspiracy. But the point being that the same people who were disqualifying Obama for something they thought was the case and probably was not, almost certainly was not, were voting for Cruz, like I did, for in the primary when he admits being born outside the country. So it's a strange thing. I didn't know what to do with it, but I didn't like any of the other candidates that were viable. But anyways, with Trump, I think what he brought to Republican politics is that pugnaciousness, that willingness to take the fight to them instead of the typical Republicans who trying to take the high road. And cultures change. You're not going to get up and give a 45-minute speech like Reagan would and encourage everyone. And the people aren't listening to that anymore, it doesn't seem like. They're listening to the tweeting. They're listening to that short, very flaming, flamboyant type of communication. And I think people like me and people that are like that, we don't like that. I want to hear a long, intellectual, really thought-provoking, profound discussion on the subject. I don't want some stupid tweet that has abbreviations all through it and emojis. I won't even read his tweets. I just have no interest in them. It's like, I don't even want to hear what he's saying. But there's a lot of people that just live off of it.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. And I think that's part of the draw of his presidency is it's an entertainment factor. And I said that on my channel recently that he's a reflection of us. We are a bombastic, entertainment-oriented culture. And so we ended up with a bombastic, entertainment-oriented president.
That's right. That's exactly right.
We're not, and again, that's that mood of the culture thing going on there. And Biden, it's unfortunate. I agree. I think someone like Andrew Yang, even though I wouldn't agree with him politically, at least he reflects something in our culture that I think would be good to see. Youth, someone a little younger, someone who is intellectual, someone who would explain things in nuanced ways. Those are good things to see. Obama was looked at that way, actually. People always said that he was good about seeing nuance. But again, understanding that different presidents for different times, different leaders are needed for different times. I always say I'm nothing like a Martin Luther myself, but I understand why he did what he did, and he was a good leader to bring about certain purposes.
Sure.
And
you can't. It's hard.
Sometimes you do need a leader. Sometimes who's really, forward and sometimes even offensive. You need that sometimes And I think Ronald Reagan, we tend to look at him as very inspiring and positive, but I think in some ways he could also be the type of person who would, he'd take it to the other side.
He would, with
He's a very
humor.
person.
His
That's
approach
true.
was
He
with
would
humor,
joke.
and he was scorching, right? His humor was scorching, and yet it was so grandfatherly that you almost couldn't. It's like the famous one where he says, "I won't hold my opponent's youth and inexperience against him." I mean, that was the campaign right there. That was it. That was over. It was crazy how he could do that with it. And Trump was just this bombastic style, which, even if you don't appreciate it personally, like I don't look at it and say, "Oh, I like that." It's not something I like. I do acknowledge the need for it at times. And like I think you make a good point. Can you imagine anyone other than Martin Luther being there at that time? I mean, really, you take anyone, even nice guys, real spiritual man. Let's say like a John Piper. There's no knock on John Piper, but I just don't think John Piper stands up to the entire Roman Empire, the Catholic Roman Empire at that time. I just don't see that. It's not because I don't think he has the guts or the courage, but it takes more than that. There's a lot of people with courage around Luther who didn't make it. Luther had a certain fight in him, I guess, and just orneriness about him, right? That made him the person that God put in that place for that time. And I think that's a great point you make with using Luther as an example. And so maybe Trump was our Luther for a while.
Yeah, and that's why I can respect people like John MacArthur, for example. I think a lot of people look at him, one way or the other. He's either this perfect embodiment of what a pastor should be, or he's really not good because he's so divisive. Well, he's a certain kind of leader. I think God is using him for certain purposes. He's not perfect, and I don't elevate him to the level of perfection. I also think it's unbiblical to have factions and to say, I'm of Paul, I'm of Apollos, I'm of MacArthur, for example.
Correct.
So I don't like that. But I can also respect that Paul probably was looked at in the early church as being, okay, he's a fighter. He'll stand up and do things and risk his life. And then you had other people in the church that they had different personalities, and God uses it all. We're the body of Christ. So I can respect someone who I would say I definitely wouldn't take the path they take or do things the way that they do it, but they're probably doing a better job fulfilling the purpose God has for them than I ever would.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
Me to be.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And I completely agree with that. I think we spend too much time, and I say I'm just speaking Christianity, right? Spend way too much time worrying about how everyone else is acting and whether or not they're behaving properly. And we should just realize that I'm in my little corner of the ministry, and if I don't like the way MacArthur, just using as an example, or Piper, whoever, if I don't like the way they do it, well, then I'll do my ministry the way I think I should do it. And MacArthur can do it the way he thinks he should do it. And I don't get why we think that needs to be an issue, right? Why do I think I need to criticize John MacArthur for opening up his church? If I don't think we should, then I'll not open up mine. And why is it that we're more worried about what the other guy is doing and not worried about let's just worry about what I'm doing. Yeah. I got enough to worry about right there.
Yeah, exactly. And, we're human. So I think that we have our prejudices, and we're sensitive too. I think what happens is sometimes someone steps on our toes, and that's when we react, is when they're stepping on our toes, on our personal, things that we hold to or that are important to us, and we don't like the way that they frame us or put us in a certain box. And so we can react strongly to that. And I find that you just have to, like Paul said, endeavor to keep the unity of the Spirit. You have to say, sometimes if someone says something, it might step on my toes, but I always look at it as we are family. We are in the family of God. And I grew up with two older brothers, and trust me, they stepped on my toes. And I'm sure I stepped on theirs. just being the younger brother. And so I learned, you're going to have disagreements with your family. Sometimes it's going to be heated, but you're still family. And I wish we would remember that in the family of God.
Yeah. And we also need to keep our disagreements within the family in the family, right?
True.
Right. And I think it's perfectly legitimate for us Christians to discuss, to even heatedly debate with amongst ourselves issues because we're not all right. And we can be helped by someone pointing out somewhere we might not have thought it through well, or we might just be wrong. And I know I've changed my position on many issues because somebody pointed something out, made a case, made an argument, was willing to run the risk of offending me and discussed it with me or debated it with me. And yeah, I may have gotten angry at the time. It may have taken me 10 years before I came back and was finally ready to really analyze the information they were providing me. But but when we let it seep out and it becomes something that is in the world, the whole world is seeing that. I don't think that speaks well of Christianity. I think that
Yeah.
that these kind of discussions need to be kept in house.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course it gets complicated because we live in a certain time period, we live in a certain country. America by nature is a country of paradoxes. you
Yes.
know, we have so much freedom here, and that was the point of this country. We're going to have religious freedom. But one of the problems we have in the church here is we have that mentality of personal choice. I can go to whatever church I want to, and if this church doesn't make me happy, I can go to the next church that'll make me happy or fulfill what I want. And so there's a lot of factors that can tend toward dividing up the body of Christ more here in America than even in other places, especially historically. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge to maintain the unity of the body in America.
Absolutely. And having lived in Mexico and I was a missionary there for many years and church planner, I can tell you it's not just America, it's
True.
everywhere. It is
That is
everywhere.
true. And it's historic. I mean, obviously, things that happened in the Reformation happened for a reason.
Mm.
There were historical reasons, and so there's no doubt about it. And Paul had to say to the early church, "You guys have divisions. This shouldn't be this way. You need to work on these things." At the same time, we also understand that some divisions are inevitable.
Hmm.
And Paul said that there are going to be wolves among you. And so you have to watch out for that too. And so there's a place for division. There's actually a time for division, but there's also that reality. I was thinking about this recently that while division might be needed at times, there's also an aspect of division that can be very carnal, that there's actually a part of humans that like to divide.
Yeah.
And it can make us feel good because I know I'm right and I'm on the right side. And so that's the kind of division we have to be very careful about within the body.
Absolutely. So what do you have going on? What's your plan going forward with your channel? You got any plans on that, or are you pressing on in your path you're on right now?
Yeah, I don't know really long term what's going to happen, but I started this journey just saying I'm going to try to really focus on consistency. And I started with a couple of videos a week when I had a kind of another job that I was doing for income. Then earlier this year, I said I'm going to really be focused just on YouTube and ministry to other churches and just trust God with income. And right about the time that I went full time doing the YouTube and evangelistic ministry is when coronavirus, the lockdowns hit, which ended up being a great advantage for my YouTube channel because I had a captive audience. And
Exactly.
people are going, if they're going to go for you know Christian stuff, they're going online a lot more. So
Yes.
so it actually has worked out, and I've started making videos pretty much every day. I'll at least try to do one video, and so I'll continue with that, and then I'll just fill it in and expand it as God leads. I have some interviews lined up, a few interviews lined up, and a couple of them are with two different authors. So kind of like you're doing with me here,
Uh-huh.
I'll be having some some more extensive conversations with them. You've seen maybe that I started doing like a weekly conversation with a guy named Jason
Whitlock.
Whitaker
Whitaker,
down
sorry.
in, yep, Jason Whitaker down in Atlanta, Georgia. So, I think I'm going to stick with those shorter videos and teaching videos, but I'm going to add conversations to that. And just, I don't have a clear-cut plan,
That sounds
a
good.
5-year plan or anything.
Right. That sounds good. I'm glad to hear that the coronavirus worked out for you in that way. That it did with a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people are riding the corona wave, right? Amazon is, and people that got into that type of thing at that moment. It's just there's a huge boon right now of people looking for content, and they've already went through Netflix 3 times, and now they're trying to find something else to watch.
The job I was working for was driving a local community bus. My hours might have disappeared anyway. So the timing of it was amazing. And like I said, I mean, the coronavirus was helpful not only for that, but then John MacArthur's situation brought a lot of viewership to my channel, which also had to do with the coronavirus.
Yes.
So the coronavirus has been, the open door for me to expand what I'm doing here, even though I know it's a really tough situation. So.
Well, that's quite a schedule you're doing if you're doing a video a day. That's a lot of work. I mean, people that haven't ever done YouTube and tried to do it, they don't realize. They think, oh, you're just sitting there, you look at the camera and say a few. Even if you do it live, like what I do, I work in construction all week. That's my day job. And then I'm a pastor of the church. That's my after hours job. And then I do this for fun. So I don't have any time for editing videos. The reason I do live is because it streams to YouTube, and that's the way it is. I don't edit it. I don't do anything because I just do not have time to do that. And I'd like to do more videos and edit them and do some nice like PragerU type graphics or something. There's just no way. I just don't have the time to do any of that. So I appreciate anyone who's doing I didn't know you were doing a video a day. That's impressive because that's a tremendous amount of work to put into it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, really. And I think that, it is work, but by God's graciousness and provision, he's allowed me to focus on it so that I can just concentrate on at least doing a short video every day, and then it's just a routine too. And you know how that is. Construction would be that way as well. You build a whole building one step at a time, and the same with now. When I look back at my content, I have hundreds of videos. It's just one video at a time, and getting into that routine and process. And like everything in life, there are times where it's just you do it because you need to do it. It's not necessarily what you get up like excited to do all the time. Other times you're really excited.
Yeah.
And and the outcomes are that way too. Sometimes I put a video out and it's like, wow, not many people really noticed or cared. And then other times it's like, how in the world did this many people find this video and actually want to watch it? So it's really interesting.
Yeah, a lot of that I think has to do with the algorithm of YouTube and what gets sent to people's. I know a lot of people. I don't know if you're having this problem, but a lot of people tell me, "Hey, we haven't seen any videos come from you for weeks," even though I put one out at least one a week, and for whatever reason, even though they're subscribed and they have the bell clicked, they just don't get the notifications.
Oh, yeah, that's too bad. They ought to get notifications if they've hit the bell notification. Sometimes maybe they need to go back and check the settings on that. But
yeah,
as far as what pops up in the feed, yeah, I mean, you can't control it, obviously, but there are things that the algorithm does that you can kind of understand it at least. And what the algorithm does is it tests your video. And one of the reasons some of my videos have taken off is because they got such an immediate reaction. When people look at a video and immediately everybody starts clicking on it, the algorithm says that's got to be a good video. I mean, everybody's clicking on it. And so it sends it out to more people. And then if those people click on it, it sends it out to more people. And it's trying to figure out the audience. And what's a hard thing is that my audience, for example, a lot of them came through the John MacArthur videos. That doesn't mean that's all I talk about.
Right.
So, the algorithm might put some of my other videos out to them, but those people may not be interested in some of my other videos. Then there's other people that wouldn't necessarily be interested in John MacArthur, but they might be interested in some of my other videos. And it's just a question of getting the algorithm to meet those people. And that just takes time. It's just one of those things. You just have to build your audience over a long period of time.
Right. Well, very good. I was going to ask you, rats, I forgot.
Okay. Was it about YouTube?
Yeah, I can't remember now. I got involved in what you were saying, and I forgot I had a question I wanted to ask you. Anyways,
you might be able to ask me, and I can do a video on it possibly.
That sounds like a good idea. Well, very good, Timothy. I really appreciate what you do. I appreciate your channel and the effort you put into it, and I really enjoy the videos. I hope that you have all the success in the world with it. I appreciated the book that you sent me, and I saw it here again. For those that don't know, we're talking to Timothy Frisch from the Frisch Perspective, and he wrote a book titled God Matters: The Importance of Belief in a World of Doubt. And you can get this from Amazon, both in the paperback here, like he sent me. You can buy it there, and you can buy it on the Kindle presentation as well. And so I would encourage you, if you're looking for a good book to read, it's not a heavy book. It's a short book, so you can read it. And it took me about a day and a half of in my spare time to read it. So it's a good read, and just a real good presentation of an apologetic about God going to a gospel presentation. At least that's the impression I got from it, and I enjoyed the perspective it had. And you also get to know Tim a little better if you read the book. So encourage you to buy his book. You can check out his channel, The Frisch Perspective. Show him your mug there. There we go.
Oh, Frisch Perspective.
The Frisch Perspective, which in German, which I learned this today, actually means, it's not just a pun on the sounding of it, it actually means the fresh perspective, which is awesome. You hit, like I said, you hit the jackpot with that. Very well done. Very nice.
That's right.
Yeah.
Use your name to your advantage.
Yes, that's right. So you can check him out on YouTube. He does videos all the time. Has a lot of like news type things, which I like that. I think that's missing, right? There's a lot of Christians doing theology and which is all great, but I liked how you and a couple others are just going through and you taking and doing like a news report and giving some Christian perspective news, not on politics necessarily, but on the church, on different pastors and stuff, and from a very objective standpoint, which I appreciate very much. And so I think you do a great job, and we seek to emulate you a little. So.
Aw, well, thank you. I always admire, when you get to meet people and see what they're doing. I see your podcast and I think, what a great setup. I would love to do something like you're doing someday and have these kinds of long form conversations. I think it's awesome. So I just feel so privileged that you would have me on and talk to me for a couple hours here. I really, really appreciate it. And it was a lot of fun.
Good. It was fun for us too. And we'll be praying for you. And God bless you, brother. And we'll hope to talk to you again. When you get your next book out, let me know. And we want to have you back on. We'll talk about it.
About Bible translation.
Yes, I'm very interested in the subject on all levels because I was a missionary in Mexico. So, yeah, I'm very interested in that subject.
Very good.
Very good, Tim. Take care, and I'll be sending you a smart shirt.
Yes, I look forward to it. I'll wear it on my channel.
Thank you. All right. Take care, Tim. It's great talking to you.
God bless.
All right. Bye.